Hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Sade here on Hidden Alchemy. Thank y'all so much for joining me for my Hidden Alchemy podcast episode. For today's episode, we are diving into sisterhood and the importance of nourishing the right relationships. Now, the creative spark to this theme for today was really sparked by my most recent visit to CultureCon in New York, which was such an amazing event. So, shout out to Amani for really piecing this Black excellence event together in New York, where we were able to just witness so many people in the creative world connect, network, collaborate, and just have a good time being in a space with each other. So at CultureCon, there was a talk by the sisters Scotty and Sylvia of the Scotty and Sylvia Show. Now, they're not real sisters in real life, but sis is just a term of endearment. And these two have their own podcast where they really just talk about navigating the world as Black women and just having that counterpart, that partner that you can have by your side, that girlfriend, that sister, that bond, that connection through moving in life and just going through the beauty, difficulties, and challenges of life in general. So that was the spark for today's podcast episode. This theme of sisterhood, I feel, is so important, especially for me. I am a woman's woman. I love having relationships with women, friendships, sisterhoods. I've grown up watching my mom have beautiful relationships with women. A lot of the women that my mom has been friends with for years are my godparents. So I've witnessed 30 plus years of sisterhoods that go through so many transitions, so many transformations, disagreements, coming back together. But I am so grateful that I was able to witness that in my home of just seeing women come together, seeing my mom have beautiful relationships with her sisters, not only just her friends, not all of her sisters, but the ones that she's close to. And watching that has really shown me the importance of relationship and what a relationship with another woman looks like in terms of friendship and just being in a sisterhood. Now, I find this topic to be so important as I get older because I noticed and I kind of feel this way, not for myself specifically, but from what I'm hearing from other women, that it is harder to make friends as you get older. And I think a lot of that just has to do with your job, your environment. Sometimes, if you are, say, for instance, working from home, it's harder to make friends. Whereas for me, as a yoga educator and working in the holistic wellness industry, I am always meeting people, which is the perks of my job. And it's easier for me to just connect and meet friends and meet people and just make really good connections. But I find this topic to be very important as we get older and as we dive deeper into this technological age, because it is getting harder for people to connect and to find that right tribe for themselves and the right relationships for themselves where they can feel safe, seen, and heard. And I think it's so important in a relationship with yourself as well as relationships with other people to feel that safety of feeling seen, feeling heard, and just coming together, having that counterpart. If there's anything that I've realized throughout my life, is that we are not here to do this alone. Okay, we are not here to do this alone. We are here to be independent in our personal journey, but to lean on others and to have that support system and to have those relationships that really make us feel like life is worth living. I love being in relationships with people. It's not the easiest thing, but it's what makes life easier and makes life more livable. So let's go ahead and dive into sisterhood and the importance of nourishing the right relationships. Now, as I said, I grew up with my mother having these different relationships with her friends who are my godparents, witnessing them grow, seeing their relationship grow over the years as they go from being in their 20s to their 30s and 40s and 50s. And I truly love watching women be in sisterhood. I think is so important to have that vulnerable, intimate relationship with your mirror. Now, just because this topic is really about sisterhood doesn't mean that relationships with men aren't important. No, I'm going to dive into that a little bit later in the podcast episode because I think that good men are great assets, but we'll go into that a little bit later. But there's just something about being in a relationship with someone that is your mirror. Like women, if you are a woman or a woman identifying person, it is so important to have a relationship with another woman identifying person because they are your mirrors as to how you relate to yourself, right? When you are in relation with the same sex, it helps you to have a different understanding as to how you relate to yourself, how you see yourself, or maybe areas where you don't see yourself and you don't relate to yourself. And I know we're not going to sugarcoat, bypass, and pretend being in relationship with the same sex, especially as women, it is very challenging because we definitely have the cattiness that can happen, we have the pettiness that can happen, the disagreements, the arguments, all of that. However, navigating through those things and finding the right people that see you and that you see, it trumps everything else on the other side of what can happen in certain relationships with women. Now, something I have definitely learned on my journey of sisterhood and building the right relationships is the first person you have to look at when it comes to navigating female relationships is the relationship with your mother or the relationship that you have with the mom figure in your life. So that could have been your grandparent, that could have been your aunt. And that's something that I noticed as even growing up and having relationships with other women. I would notice that women that had more difficulties and challenges with their mom had a lot more disdain towards other women. And what I mean by that is maybe feeling like they can't trust women, maybe feeling like, women are always jealous of them, out to get them, feeling a need to dominate. This is another thing, feeling a need to dominate other women in a relationship. That's definitely going to stem from not having the strongest relationship with your mother. Because, and I'm just going to use my relationship as an example, which isn't perfect. My mom and I have come such a long way. I remember when I was young, I wanted to be like my mother. I wanted to dress like my mother. I wanted to hang out with my mother. My mother was so cool. She was so stylish. My mom has a lot of Leo placements, so she was always very just stylish and bubbly and optimistic. That's one thing about my mother I love. She's optimistic and she moves from a place of joy, always moving from her heart space. Now, of course, it came with other areas of being, a leader and thinking that she was the leader of everything sometimes, and being very vocal and outspoken. And these are great qualities that my mom has taught me. But growing into my own woman and my own person, we butted heads as a kid, which is normal. And me moving away from home and living my own life, that was what helped my mother and I have a better relationship. And most importantly, my mother and I going through very difficult challenges together where we had to have a lot of uncomfortable conversations. So, not avoiding the uncomfortable conversation that you need to have with a parent or a maternal parent in your life, and letting them know, hey, when you do this, it bothers me in this way. Like, really being transparent and upfront. So, now to this day, my mother and I, at this point in our relationship, have the strongest relationship that we've ever had, probably from when I was in the womb, right? Because that's when you have that strongest connection to your mom because you're connected to her, you're attached to her. Whereas now, because we went through, having those conversations, having those disagreements, not wanting to talk to my mother, being annoyed, being frustrated, now we are better than ever and have such a beautiful relationship. And it was when I started to work on myself and my healing journey, work on my shadow work, look at my darker areas where I'm not perfect, that I was able to see my mother and I was able to offer my mother more grace and more compassion. So I want to talk about that. Like the relationship with the mom really, really sets the tone for how you are going to be in relation with other women. And it's not an easy relationship. I feel like we always talk about the daddy issue type of relationship, but we never talk about the mom wound, which is very woundful because you come from the womb of your mother. So that relationship is going to always need to take precedent because you are literally connected to her spiritually. Regardless of any issue, you will be connected spiritually to your mom forever. So once my mother and I worked on our relationship, my mother and I are like best friends now. That is my girl. That's my home girl. That's my sis. I love my mother. That was what changed the way that I was in relation with other women. I was able to see other women as literally my extension of self, right? But you have to understand self before you can feel like you have that extension of self in other women. Now, that wasn't all women. I had to decide what was important for me in a relationship, in a friendship. And I had to first be my own friend. So, healing my relationship with myself, being my own friend, working on my relationship with my mother, as hard and challenging as it was. And this doesn't mean that you have to be best friends with your mom, right? But there has to be a level of understanding, a level of love, a level of compassion and grace that we extend so that we can have these beautiful relationships with other women. And once I was able to get through that, that's when my ideology on sisterhood shifted and what was important and foundational in a sisterhood, and attracting what I was giving to myself and what I was seeing in the mirror of my mother. That is really what you end up attracting in your female relationships, because your maternal parent is that first figure. So, healing that relationship, learning, okay, the foundations of respect that I give to myself, the foundations of being vulnerable is so important. To be vulnerable in your relationships, which can be very challenging, but it's allowing ourselves to be seen for the truth of who we are. And I've realized that if I cannot be vulnerable and feel seen or heard in a relationship, in a friendship, in a sisterhood, then it's not the right relationship for me, especially, and I mentioned this in my previous podcast episode, of being a healer. It's so easy to attract all types of beings, all types of people. And I put this back on my mom. My mom works in medicine and nursing, so she is always taking care of people. So she also too has this energy of people leaning on her, people wanting her energy, people wanting her light just for guidance and feeling like a safe haven. And that was passed down to me. So when I wasn't harnessing that energy correctly, I was attracting all types of people into my life. And because I had such a big heart, I was trying to love on everybody. But I had to realize that there are certain foundations and rules that apply in a friendship so that two people can feel safe rather than me being the giver. And that was something that I had struggled with, was constantly feeling as if I was the giver in a relationship, but I wasn't receiving. And once I worked on my relationship with myself and worked on my relationship with my mother, the feminine, right? Because the feminine is the receiver. That's when I was able to say, wait a minute, let me see what I'm receiving from people based off of what I give to myself and if it feels safe. And the energy that feels safe is the energy that I'm going to entertain. So that is a big foundational standpoint that has helped me to nurture the right relationships, was being in that feminine energy for myself, healing my feminine, working on my feminine. And that's going to be a topic that I dive deeper into in the podcast, of just being the receiver and feeling okay receiving love, receiving nourishment. And that's why I say, if you struggle in a relationship with your maternal figure, there might have been a lack of nourishment, a lack of softness, a lack of that feminine, that care. So you have to go back and either heal that with the parent or reparent that within yourself, especially if that parent is no longer around, or if you and that parent really cannot vibe, which is so common and so normal. That's another thing. It is very normal to have challenges with your maternal parent or with both parents. It's very normal. So, reparenting oneself is important, because the reality is a lot of times our parents are moving from their own space of abundance and their space of lack. So, there are certain things that they really couldn't give because they didn't have it themselves. Once you extend that compassion and that grace for your maternal parent, then you can go back and reparent that within yourself, tapping into that feminine energy of healing, of nourishment, of love, of softness. Once I started cultivating that within myself, then I was able to notice what relationships also cultivated that. And those were the relationships that I focused more on. Instead of trying to be in relation with all types of beings, it was, no, what makes you feel safe? Go towards where the safety is. Go towards where the love is, that is in alignment with your love language and the way that you respect yourself. So once I started reparenting myself, then I was really able to see, okay, this relationship is cool, but it might not be a relationship that I want to nurture and give so much of my energy to, but it is a relationship that is okay. And that's another topic too with nurturing the right relationships, is understanding that your friends can't be everything, right? One friend can't be everything. There are friends that bring different types of value, and there are people who don't bring any value, right? And there might be a relationship where it doesn't have to be an all or nothing type of thing. It can be like, this person is cool for these types of things, but they might not be my sisterhood. They might not be the relationship that I nurture, but it's a cool person. And I would like to, keep it on an acquaintance level, keep it on a cool level, but that's not going to be in the category of nourishing my sisterhood relationships, my relationships that make me feel foundational, that make me feel safe. Now, going back to the topic of vulnerability, when you are reparenting yourself and being softer and moving from that feminine, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to be in relationships where you can be vulnerable. And it's once you are in those relationships where you are vulnerable and in a weaker space, and I want to be very clear that weak does not mean lesser than, but it means in a space of needing guidance, needing help, needing support. And when you are able to do that in a relationship, that's where I was able to really decipher between who are the support systems in my life and who are the people that I'm the support system, but when I'm in that space of need, I'm not really getting that energy or that type of connection back. In those moments of vulnerability, and this is why vulnerability and intimacy is so important in sisterhood and relationships, it's in those moments of vulnerability that you really see, okay, this foundation isn't as sturdy as I thought it was, and I might need to just pull back my energy and focus it more in areas where it's more foundational. Now, depending on what type of relationship you have, then you can base it off of if it's an all or nothing thing. And this is what my therapist and I really work on understanding on a deeper level, is not every relationship needs to be an all or nothing. We don't always have to cut people off. Sometimes it's really just a matter of pulling back our energy and focusing it more on relationships that are a lot more foundational and a lot more necessary for where we are in our life, because that's another reality. We are always changing, evolving, and growing. So a lot of times those friends that we might have been super close with at one point in our life, we're transitioning into a new sector of our life and we might not need that closeness anymore, but it doesn't mean that there needs to be a cutting off. Now, of course, that is completely situational. I have had relationships where I felt that I was not seen, I was not heard, nor respected. And when that was on the table, because of the way that I value myself, I see myself, I respect myself, those were relationships that I said, okay, this is not a priority at all. And this is not something that I can really give my energy and time to because there is no respect and I'm not seen or heard. So, yeah, this can go, this can be cut off. But the relationships where we are just shifting and evolving, and the space that we used to have for that person is no longer needed in its intensity anymore, those relationships deserve a conversation and then a pullback, right? But it's still a relationship that brings value just in a different way. So there's so much complexities to nourishing your relationships. And I can honestly say that this is something that I am really just now deepening, harnessing, and cultivating on a deeper level. Because it was so easy for me to make friends and meet people, I wasn't always the person that truly understood the value of good relationships and good friendships and taking the time to nurture those relationships. Because regardless if it's romantic or not, nurturing a relationship takes work, it takes effort, it takes time. And we don't talk about that in terms of our friendships. We like to just kind of have friends and people that we meet, but we don't take the time to honor that friendship and to check in. It's so important to check in. And that's another thing that I noticed on when I determine if a relationship is a relationship that I want to continue nourishing is there a check-in point? Am I the one that's always checking in on you to see how you're doing? Or are you the one that's like, hey girl, miss you, love to see you, hope you're doing well. Let's get together soon so we can catch up. We can, talk about what's been going on. That is a relationship where I feel, okay, I am seen, I see the other person, I'm heard, I hear the other person. Thank you. Thank you for seeing that. Yeah, I haven't spoken to you in some time. Thank you for checking in on me. But is the reverse happening? Because what would happen for me is there would be so many instances where I would be the person checking in, but I wasn't allowing myself to receive that from other people and focus on the people who were actually doing that back to me. Okay, so that is a big factor in me determining, okay, is this a relationship that I need to really focus on and nourish? Is how are we checking in on each other? Is it a one-way street? Am I always the one that's available, or are you there for me as well? And something that I noticed with a person that is definitely not my friend, but she was a person who was there was a time where I was going through something, and this person kind of knew what I was going through and never, it was always this sense of like absorbing energy from other people. Like, you know how there's people like that where you are an asset and they see that and they absorb from you, but they don't really bring anything. They don't add anything. And a lot of that too is because they don't add anything to their own life. And that was a relationship that I had to realize, okay, this is not a relationship that I should really pour into, because there's no substance, there's no base, there's no value. And we have to, I hate that we have to be this critical in our relationships, but because your relationships in life can either put you on the right path or sway you to hell, truly. And because of that, it is so important to have the right people around you. I cannot stress the importance of having the right people in your corner and in your circle, because as we get older, life gets more challenging. That's a reality. Life gets more challenging because we have more weight. We get older and there's more weight put on. So when you don't have the right people, okay, you can either be swayed in the wrong direction or you can be propelled further on your journey. And that's why it is important to be critical. Not critical to the point where you are bashing other people for their humanness, no, but just being aware of, what am I receiving from this relationship? What am I receiving? What energy am I receiving from this person? And what am I giving? Am I the one checking in? Am I the one trying to see how this person is doing? Am I the one being supportive? Am I the one showing up? And then what am I receiving? Right? Relationships are a give and take, and we have to analyze them because they're so important in our development in our life, especially sisterhood. Because as women, no one is going to understand a woman more than a woman, right? So when you are in these beautiful progressive relationships with other women, it can really boost your life in ways, on a spiritual level, on an emotional level, on a financial level, right? And that's another topic I'm going to talk about, how your network determines your net worth. You being around the right people and being in the right relationships can literally shift your entire life. And that's why the older I have gotten, I have become more aware of the importance of nourishing the right relationships and more critical about who are the people around me, right? Why do I have them around? There was a point in my life where, me being so social and it being easy for me to connect and meet people, I would just have people around for the sake of having people around. And then I had to learn that that's not smart, because not everybody around you cares to be around you. They care to benefit from you. Okay. And I had to realize that. And not everybody who's around you has your best interest. So you have to be aware of, what is the energy that's around me and what's the quality of the energy that's around me, and put people in their categories. Not, like I said, one friend can't be everything. So you have to find a way to put people in their categories of to where they bring value. I think something that I've learned in nourishing my relationships is trying to put someone in a spot that they can't fulfill and then getting mad at them is not the way. It's seeing who they are, loving who they are for whoever. Let people show you who they are. Then you put them in the right category, right? You're either of value or of no value, right? And then the of value has the categories, and the of no value is like, okay, you're not relevant in this point of my life, right? So really taking the time to be critical about the type of friend that you are, which is about learning how to be that friend for yourself. learning how to be that parent, heal that feminine within yourself. And then you can go ahead and be in these successful relationships built off of love, built off, well, determining what that love means for you, but built off of respect, built off of honor, built off of seeing each other for each other's humanness. It's so easy, especially in this day and age where everything is becoming transactional. We see people as transactional objects, and we don't see people for their humanness anymore. And I see this becoming bigger and bigger of an issue as we get more involved in technology in this AI world where it's just about transactions, but we need people. You need people in life because life is not easy. And when you have the right people around you, that's going to really determine how you can get through the difficulties of life. Are you struggling because you have people in your corner that like to see you fall, that want to see you down, that don't support you, that don't respect you? Or are you able to get through the difficult moments because you have people that, if they can't help you, they have a resource that can help you? Hey, I know somebody. I know a therapist. I know a healer. I know this person. Take care of yourself. I can't check in on you every day, but I'm going to check in on you from here and then. How you doing, love? Let's go grab coffee. You know, as you get older, you don't have as much time to be so involved in other people's life because so much is going on in your life, but it's taking the time, right? That's what really showcases the friendships and the relationships. And it doesn't have to be long. It could be through a text, it could be through a meme, it could be through anything, but just taking the time to show up for yourself, show up for others, and then sit back and receive. What are you receiving from folks to determine, is this a relationship that is worth nourishing? And that can only be decided if you are nourishing yourself. And I have made the mistake, and I'm sure a lot of us have, of focusing on relationships where we're trying so hard to be seen in that relationship, but we're not actually being seen. And we focus so much on nourishing that bond, nourishing that relationship. And in reality, it's not even a relationship built off of the needs that we need in order to feel safe or any type of foundation. So really taking that time to self-reflect. How are you being a friend to yourself? How are you loving on yourself? What's going on between you and the relationship with your mother, your maternal figure, because that's your mirror. And then that's going to decipher between, okay, how do I see myself amongst other women? How do I see women as my extension? And how can I better harness and develop better relationships, which is going to happen with difficulties, with challenges? How do you come back from those challenges? I recently had a situation with a friend of mine where we had a huge situation happen, and I needed space. I needed space. And that space took about a year. And I realized that in that timing of it taking me the time that it took for me to deal with life that was happening, deal with myself, my own inner conflict, to then properly approach the situation from a mature standpoint in a place of wanting to hear and listen to another person's perspective, this person proceeded to feel as if me taking the time that I needed was too long or a form of disrespect. But I had to learn in that instance of, when we're dealing with relationships and we're dealing with conflict, there has to be a lot of patience involved. There has to be a lot of compassion and ease involved, because we don't know what people are going through internally within themselves. So any type of relationship that you're in, especially during that conflict resolution time, that's the time where you really have to just give people the space that they need, take the space for yourself to do the work on yourself, and then come back when it's in alignment for y'all to really communicate what the issue is instead of talking over each other. It's like relationships should be so built off of respect and transparency and honesty. And even if that honesty is something that, it may suck for the other person to hear, transparency and honesty is just a level of respect and love, for me at least, in relationships. So me showing up from that space of, I'm going to be vulnerable, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be weird, and regardless of how it's taken, this is how I have to show up, and in hopes that in that way of me showing up, I will attract the right relationships that are really in alignment with me. Now, another final thing I want to touch on, I know the topic is sisterhood and nourishing the right relationships, but it's this idea of men also being very valid counterparts in friendships. I feel like society really forces us to just be romantically involved with men. Well, if you are a woman who likes to date men, I'm trying to be very inclusive of everybody, okay? It's 2023. But society really just glamorizes this one way of being in a male female relationship. And I have found, I have always had male romantic partners and male friends. And I sometimes find like when you keep men in the friend zone, they sometimes do a much better job than just being in the romantic zone, because sometimes when you move them into that space too early, it doesn't work, right? So being in platonic relationships with men, it just helps me to see my role as the feminine, and can I really be in this role of the feminine with this person, and understanding men beyond just romance. And good men are great assets, okay? Good men are great assets because men are resourceful. Women are too, but men are resourceful. They are givers, right? Caretakers in the sense of resource takers and resource givers. So when you have good men in your corner and they're resourceful, if you need help with anything, they could be right there to assist you in a way that maybe your female friends couldn't. So I'm not negating the importance of having men in your life and just having sisterhood, but I did want to focus on the importance of being in beautiful relationships with women, because it is an extension of your own heart and it is an extension of who you are. It's not easy as you get older, really finding those right relationships, because we've all gone through things, we've all been jaded, we've all been heartbroken, we've all been hurt, and we're bringing those things into our partnerships. But it is important to have people in your corner so that when you are going through the joys in your life, they're there. When you're going through the hardships in your life, they're there as that support system. And it really just makes life more enjoyable. So, thank y'all so much for joining me for my podcast on sisterhood and the importance of nourishing the right relationships, and just how to decide on what relationships are relevant for you and what relationships are safe and secure for you in your life on your journey. Thank y'all so much. I'm Sade, and I will see you for our next podcast episode.